Molten metal exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit was discovered in the rubble of Ground Zero, underneath the Twin Towers and Building 7. Even with heavy rain on September 14th and 21st, a constant stream of fire retardants and water, described as creating a giant lake. These fires would not be extinguished until December 13th, 2001, making it the longest burning structural fire in history.
The temperatures that we know existed within the collapse, within the debris pile, are physically impossible from an atmospheric jet fuel fire. Cannot be done.
As well as the molten metal in the debris, it was also observed prior to the South Tower's collapse.
You have to explain this flowing material right at the corner, by the way, which is on the north face of the South Tower. But right there at that corner, this molten metal with the orange glow, yellow-orange glow, flows out for minutes. There's a lot of it. And then right at that corner, you see this weakening, the twisting and the collapse of the building. NIST tries to explain that molten metal, which is yellow-orange color, a lot of material flowing out. They said, well, it's aluminum. That's what they said early on.
Melt aluminum. Aluminum is white colored, silver colored. There is no different colors in it. That's the only color it can be because it's silver colored.
There are several reasons that Professor Jones can state with certainty that this is molten iron from thermate rather than molten aluminum. One reason is that aluminum does not glow this bright, as he demonstrated in experiments before he was forced into early retirement by university officials. Another reason is that he obtained a sample of the material and analyzed it. It turned out to be iron, not structural steel or aluminum. The only way to explain this stream of molten iron is that several tons of thermite were placed in the tower or the airplane.
The specialized explosive used by professionals to demolish a steel frame is called thermate. It is placed in key locations and melts large steel joints in an instant, which is precisely what we see here. Look closely at this photograph. This is one of the box girders of the central core. Look at it. It's been clearly melted. Although jet fuel does not create anything near the heat necessary to melt steel, the physicists and engineers began to find evidence of large amounts of molten steel pouring out of the side of the building, pouring down into the basement, creating incredible temperatures, 1100 degrees at the top of the rubble pile 6 weeks later, and turning up months later as huge chunks of iron and concrete slag.
And the Twin Towers share one utterly bewildering similarity: the presence of molten metal found in the debris of all three buildings weeks after the collapse.
Is this molten metal that we have now studied at length that came from these buildings and existed then in pools underneath the rubble of all three skyscrapers, both towers and Building 7.
This is how it's been since day one. Oh, it's unbelievable. And this is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. And as we get closer to the center of this, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was a core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright, bright reddish orange color. See that stuff he's pulling out? What was that, Chief? We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. Red hot. If we hit it too much steam, you won't be able to see what he's doing. Great.
Here is the meteorite, molten iron fused with concrete.
And architects, engineers, people who work with steel, welders have just never seen the level of destruction and the level of deformation of this material in our lives.
It is true that heat expands steel. In a fire, steel members may swell and bend slightly. But this, how could these huge tangles have been created? Explosives also deform steel. As they fire, gas pushes outward. The force of the gas can easily bend a large steel column.
Beams where it was molten steel that was being dug out.
It's this fused element of steel, molten steel and concrete and all of these things all fused by the heat into one single element.
And almost like a chunk of lava from Kilauea or Iceland, where they're very sharp but breakable shards on the end here.
The grapplers were pulling stuff out, big sections of iron that were literally on fire on the other end. They would hit the air and burst into flames, which was pretty spooky to see.
There was even a point where you would create an air pocket by moving steel, fueling the fires underground. It would ignite cars and cars would just blow up. But, you know, these underground fires were just like the fires of hell.
You see how this debris is still smoking? That's from the fires that are still burning. 8 weeks later, we still got fires burning. Every now and then, one of the pieces of equipment will dig in, they'll open up a small area, the oxygen will rush in, and you'll get this plume of brown, black smoke coming up. That's because that fire just got more oxygen. So, I mean, these things are burning. At one point, I think they were about 2,800 degrees.
And all of a sudden, he comes out of this little tunnel screaming, "Wait till you see what I found." And he pulls in ministers and officials, and there, this cross is fully extended, melted together with the intense heat. The two beams were never initially part of the same structure. Heat literally melted them together. And the piece of metal that's draped over was molten metal that had literally fallen over one of the arms.
Steel-toed boots is one of the biggest things.
Steel-toed boots?
Steel-toed boots. Out still on the rubble, it's still, I believe, 1,100 degrees. The guy's boots just melt within a few hours.
It was literally steaming. Your boots would melt in certain areas. That's how hot it was. The steel was coming out red in certain areas from the first couple of weeks at least.
I'm curious about the pool of molten steel that was found in the bottom of the towers.
I am too.
And
please tell me about it. Have you seen it?
Well, not personally, but eyewitnesses there found huge pools of molten steel beneath the towers, and some scientists don't think that the collapse of the building could have melted all that steel.
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel. I know of absolutely nobody, no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it. I was on the site, I was on the steel yards, so I don't know that that's so.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry.
Yeah. Like lava.
Like lava.
From a volcano.
Underground, it was still so hot that molten metal dripped down the sides of a wall from Building 6.
However, they do hit hot spots occasionally, and everything stops.
There were fires of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit below the ground.
I don't know that that's so.
There's video of it.
Melted around 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. I think it's probably pretty difficult to get that kind of temperatures in a fire.
Well, NASA pictures, thermal images showed those sorts of temperatures in the basement.
Would you send them to me?
Okay.
My name is Mark, and I'm the individual who was questioning Dr. Gross, and he asked me to email to him those thermal images. When I approached him after his talk to get his email address for that purpose, he refused to provide it to me. I think this is important because it reveals the attitude of the NIST investigators, which is one of willful ignorance of what really happened on 9/11.